Today, just a quick rundown on the GelFire TAC Target. Hits can be made anywhere to the front panel. Can be registered by the hit counter, which is currently set for 3 hits. Hit counter can be adjusted. There's 5 different options for the reset of the hit counter, as follows. 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits, 4 hits, and the last option is a loop counter, as follows. So we'll get to 10 hits, the lights go out, and then it keeps cycling through the count after that. So some people might have a use for that. And once again, we've got a manual reset button. At any point, we can go back to 0. I'll just readjust the hit counter back to 3 hits. And as you can see, the display blacks out, the backlight blacks out, and they both black out for about 1.5 seconds, so it's very obvious when you've made all your hits. There's something I just want to mention at this point is the display brightness. I've got it currently set pretty low because it is affecting the camera. The brightness is digitally controlled, not voltage controlled, which means there is a certain frequency that of the display, the way it works, and it affects the way the camera sees it. So just to prove the point, the brightness does go a lot brighter, more for outdoor use. If you were to use that at night time or indoors, it'd be probably too bright. You get a bit of shooter blindness and stuff like that, so you tend to want to drop it down a bit. And of course, for the use of the camera at this point, we'll keep it down a bit low so it doesn't flare up and look too bright with the camera. On the subject of accuracy sensing, we've found in a lot of competitions we've run already that just being able to move between several targets with the timer running, it's challenging enough to put hits on this overall panel wherever you make them. But for those that do want to run single targets and maybe add some accuracy sensing, can easily be done using a Gel color change target. Just trim it down. It will fit pretty neatly, bit of double-sided tape or even regular tape, and you can add very cheap, effective accuracy sensing to the targets if that's required. But for the most part, especially when the timer's running and you're doing competitions, the target itself is at certain distances is challenging enough. That's what we've found. And moving on to the rear panel, I just want to mention the standard size. This channel here for mounting, the standard size is 30mm square, whether it be timber or aluminium tube. Nice standard there for one way to mount the target. Or included with the target are the brackets, the nylon wing bolts, and a battery holder. So I am going to mention, holds 8AA, so I am going to mention at this point that you can use, if you want, especially in a home situation or maybe otherwise, you can buy adapters at GelFire with the right connector straight into that power socket. And incidentally, quite a few of the external components of this product are available at GelFire, which that was very deliberate. I think in some places that serviceability could be an issue. You might want to fix one really quick, for example, and all these parts are cheaply available. The switch even, the sockets, the plugs, these controls, all available at GelFire. Anyway, moving on. On-off switch, power in, 12 volts. That is a programming socket which may be used later on. People might come up with ideas for various competitions and certain functions they want the target to be able to do. And we'll have a chance of doing that by way of this socket. At the top is a manual reset button. So the hit count display might be at a certain number. and you might have cause to just want to manually reset that to 0. You can anytime. That's the hit count selector, that controller there. You've got 5 options, as explained earlier, for the hit count reset options. Sensitivity control, very important, especially relating to gel blasters. We have a way of adjusting the sensitivity of the hit panel, which can be very handy, and initially is where you start in setting up the target. And finally, down here we have the brightness control, and that of course is critical because, as I said earlier, in nighttime situation you can easily find the brightness be too bright. It could be a bit blinding for people aiming at the target. So, and then of course in daylight circumstances you're going to want to wind that right up, which will of course flatten the battery a bit quicker. But earlier tests we've found batteries to be lasting around 20 hours. Pretty good batteries under not full brightness, maybe 3/4 brightness. We've had pretty surprising run times. Finally, down the bottom here, these outputs, the top 2 relating to timing. So they give 12-volt pulses. The top output pair here provide a pulse when all the hits are made to the target. A 12-volt pulse is then sent to stop a stopwatch, for example. You may want to add a sound effects or an LED or something to these outputs, keeping in mind that you can't draw a lot of current from the outputs. You have to use relays if you want to be able to fire pretty heavy devices. Something I can demonstrate, for example, is I can demonstrate the outputs with this little buzzer, which I'll connect up and I'll show you in a moment. Okay, I've hooked up the buzzer to the pulsed output. It gives you a pulse every time a hit is made, so I'll just demonstrate that. Target's resetting. So that buzzer, some people could have a use for that, further indication that hits have been made. Otherwise, you could hook up lighting or just about any effect you want being driven and fired by that pulse from that output. I'll just hook up the other output and demonstrate that. Okay, I've hooked up the buzzer to the other output, and this top output gives you a long pulse at the time the target is resetting after you've made all your hits, as I'll demonstrate. 1, 2, 3. And we currently use that pulse to stop the stopwatch with the GelFire timing system. But those with indoor venues, or anyone with a bit of imagination, could use these 2 outputs for all kinds of sound and lighting effects. And people could come up with ideas that I wouldn't have even thought of. So I just thought it was a good idea to have those outputs available for those kind of things. Well, I couldn't leave the shed without demoing the donger. So it's just an example of what you can drive directly from the 12-volt pulsed outputs. So it's not too easy to find little electric bells and things these days. Everyone just does digital sound effects now, which of course could be triggered by those outputs. But yeah, the old-fashioned way is just get a solenoid to smack some metal. Well, that completes the rundown on the GelFire TAC Target. Anyone with questions or comments, feel free to do so. Get in touch via the Facebook page, and stay tuned. The next video we're going to have a look at various ways to run timing with the TAC targets. So we'll see you then.